So I'm here to give a little preview in tomorrow on kind of the state of client adoption and ICPs. If you've never heard of the acronym ICPs, don't worry. I didn't learn about it until I think last FDS when I was helpfully brought on board. It means ideal customer profile. People often use synonyms like lighthouse customer or, customer vertical or something like it really defines like a category of users and types of adoption that we're targeting as a market and network. And of course, being a large scale decentralized storage network, we don't target just one, but we have multiple different groups that we have already found kind of adoption and traction within. We're starting to see paying demand, which is one of the best signals for product market fit that you can find, that someone will give you, value, unit of value for the service you are providing. And where we're starting to see growth, and I have some hypotheses on what I think are future valuable ICPs for us to double down on and research further to keep growing in this area. So quick reminder, you saw these slides already in Juan's talk, but we are continuing to follow and scale along this Filecoin master plan. We've already built the world's largest decentralized storage network. Many of us are very deeply focused on onboarding and safeguarding humanity's data into that large-scale decentralized capacity and making that easier and building numerous on-ramps that help humanity's data wherever it lives in other existing systems, be they online or offline, can come to the Filecoin network and are benefited by what we have to offer here. And last but not least, bringing compute to that data and enabling all sorts of rich web scale applications to interop with data that's stored in Filecoin. And a lot of the work we're doing around FWS is actually to build more of a platform layer where services can interop and humanity's data that doesn't just want archival storage, but wants hot storage, wants retrieval, wants compute, wants encryption, wants access controls. They can then interop across those many different types of services within one platform and substrate. One of the reasons why I'm so excited about FWS, but you have to come to Thursday if you want to hear more about that, or sorry, Friday, if you want to hear more about that. When we think about Filecoin's businesses, we also have often broken this down into like the Web3 storage market and the Web2 storage market, because there's different sets of defaults and expectations within there. Decentralized cloud is still small in comparison to the Web2 storage markets behemoths that have spent 2 decades, maybe even longer in some cases, growing their adoption. And we are, still significantly undercutting the pricing of the Web2 storage markets with our decentralized storage offering, which is an opportunity for us to accrue Lighthouse users and have a carrot for folks to go through the early growing hurdles of switching to a newer network. And so here you can see the view of like the Filecoin economy versus some of the larger markets that are nearby, whether that's the cloud object storage market, the archival storage market, CDN market, and others. You also already saw this diagram that Juan created for last FDS that kind of broke things down into 4 main verticals that have a couple of ICP differences between them. There's the large scale data clients. Usually they're existing Web2. These are archives. Now, the interesting thing is even in this market, I've gone and talked to a number of folks from like Backblaze and AWS and other places. There's a different sort of needs for really large scale storage in the AI world versus how historical backup has worked in the past for Web2, which has been, much less common, slow writes, as is said here. Now you're starting to see faster writes and reads as we have really large scale AI storage that's coming into this vertical. But that's a lot of your archival use cases, exabytes and exabytes of storage archives. They're much less hot. It's reasonable that you might expect like 24 hours to get data out of a system or something like that. We have Web2 object storage. That's your kind of, span of AWS, usually from S3 all the way down maybe to the hotter tiers of Glacier at least. But it's object storage. It's, much faster reads and writes. And usually many of these users don't care too much about which exact group is storing their data. They just want their data to be stored. So on-ramps are a great solution for these types of users to smoothly enable them to switch and not care about a lot of the details of the system. Big things we've seen that this group cares about is price as you imagine, a lot of these are small to medium businesses. They do often care about integrations and things like access controls. We're seeing an increasing number of them that care about lock-in, care about security, care about data locality, and kind of like more control over where their data lives, especially now that we're starting to see more geographical or regional tensions between groups. Now over on the Web3 side, I think to date, we have seen the most adoption of Filecoin with Web3 object storage. NFTs, Filecoin is, I think, the most used solution, backs NFT storage, OpenSea uses it. Lots of decentralized websites use Filecoin. Fleek through Sriracha has a major community of folks who are using Filecoin. Decentralized Social lives in here. And we're starting to see the early days of maybe decentralized AI agents, though still very nascent, but very exciting potential futures. Interesting things that we've seen the early days of, but maybe not quite fully scaled yet, is things like data DAOs, where you have larger scale collaborations of individual users pooling their resources, where they have their own objects in an object collection that then becomes an archive through the contribution of many individuals in a fully peer-to-peer, you own your own data sort of model. Last but not least, we have Web3 chain storage. We've seen some early adoption here of Filecoin with Solana, most notably, but also more recently Cardano, a couple of others, but I'm not going to spill cats out of bags too early. Again, you have to come to later days if you want to hear more about that. But we've seen early adoption here, but I'd still say we're far away from the scale of adoption in Web3 that I would expect and think we are fully capable of as a network right now. And I also, I think we're starting to now see the scale of clients that make this a very worthwhile domain for us to go in. In the world where Web3 object storage NFTs are like a couple kilobytes, Web3 chain storage is starting to be on the terabyte to even petabyte scale. All of the layer 2 networks that are building on top of Ethereum, that blob storage is starting to get quite large. And so there's decent opportunity there to be a large scale storage provider, and we don't have strong on-ramps that are going to market there yet. And I think that's a big opportunity. Getting a bit ahead of ourselves though, when we're talking about how we as a network, Filecoin, goes after these different markets, the way we have designed ourselves is we have our kind of like L1 chain set of core primitives and building blocks. And then we have L2s or on-ramps or applications or storefronts, whatever you want to call them, that are going to market and targeting a specific subset of the vertical. That's because what Web2 large-scale storage customers want is incredibly different from Web3 object storage. You try and build a business that's going to be the same interface across both of those, you fail. And you end up not succeeding in building a solution that can scale up with very happy paying customers. You need to build a different product. And so that's why we've decentralized those layers of the stack so that L2s and on-ramps can focus much more on successfully converting a specific group. And it's awesome to see the number of on-ramps that have come in and built out offerings in the Filecoin network. Often these are built out with experts who have built some of these primitives and building blocks, seen the opportunity, worked with the users in a vertical, recognized what they need differently, whether it's privacy and access controls, Snowflake integration, like large scale shipping of drives back and forth, and have then tuned an offering that goes one step beyond what these L1 primitives offer them. And so huge shout out to all of these groups who are, and I'm sure there's some that I'm missing as well. By the way, please tell me which ones I'm missing so that I can continue adding them to these diagrams, and or feel free to move these around as it better highlights it. But as you can see, we have a couple folks focused on large Web2 scale storage. Akave, I think, is the only one that's really starting to hit some of this Web2 object storage with especially the needs around integrations. We have Sriracha, Lighthouse, and to some extent Recall from the decentralized AI side, focused on Web3 object storage. And then I think Triton, and then I know Triton is using CID Gravity these days, are the ones who are kind of offering the strongest solution, I believe, for Web3 chain storage, though I think there's a lot of opportunities to make sure that we're offering even more on-ramp solutions here. So as we're taking a step back from like, this is what we have, but like what generally are our strengths as a network that we should then bring to bear on the customer profiles that most need those strengths. So what do we learn from recognizing our strengths and then bringing that into our market prioritization? So first, we are the largest decentralized storage network. Our model as a storage network of bringing capacity to bear, having large scale incentives for significant storage provider operations to come build in the Filecoin economy means we now have exabytes of capacity and onboarded data, which is something that no other decentralized storage network can say. And also a model where we can support those really large scale use cases in a way that even sometimes the very large scale, backblazes of the world can't necessarily bring to bear the decentralized ecosystem of storage that can move through Filecoin in the way we're modeled. Like, again, we're not trying to replicate everyone's data across every node in the network. That would be unviable when you're onboarding exabytes of storage per year. And we've also been doing this for a while. We've been doing it for 4.5 years, longer for the many people who worked on this long before the mainnet launched. But we've also been evolving Filecoin over time. So things like having FVM so that you can have programmability and now build all of FWS inside of FVM and have a much faster upgrade process. Having truly decentralized communities and ecosystems of storage providers, builders, on-ramps, et cetera, is something that is kind of unique to our storage network versus other decentralized storage networks out there. Learnings from that, we've already solved a lot of problems, so we should harness the fact that we've solved those problems and build on those foundations, put them to work. Also, a lot of our best ICPs are probably going to have large and or growing, like fast scale growth data sets. And so we want to double down on markets where we're going to be kind of uniquely beneficial. Another important learning or strength, we have already started structuring ourselves around an L1 and L2 model. We have L1 capabilities that can be reused, remixed, customized by L2s. It means that we are way more collaborative than most other storage networks out there. Like, we can be a peanut butter jelly combo with many other groups that might be going to market in a very specific vertical, but might not have, say, the level of scale, the level of storage provider community, the ability to target storage to a specific region, which are all things that we uniquely have. We also, our crypto economics have enabled us to set up a low cost gradient versus some of the higher cost alternatives in, say, Cloudflare, AWS, elsewhere, which gives us a carrot in this point in time to attract folks into our market and then be able to grow up the capability around them over time. And so we benefit from collaboration. We should find opportunities to make love and not war with other networks. We also should continue investing and being a great place to launch new on-ramps and new services, because we are kind of like uniquely positioned to be a collaboration and ecosystem of many storage markets and services. Another strength, our storage is global and it's local in a way. So we don't have these central failure points. There isn't someone who's running the one true Filecoin storage provider backend that will be the only one who serves you your data somewhere. We actually do have a structure that enables things like autonomous regions or entities without a central bank account, or businesses with very strong autonomy requirements to come to the Filecoin ecosystem and control their own destiny. So that's definitely a big sell versus the lock-ins you might have to, having to do business in the United States or having to work with a central entity that has censorship control over what you're storing with them. And that is something that we should harness, as that is especially growing more and more notable across many different types of customers who are looking for alternatives versus the places they're doing business right now. So things we can look at, where can we be building up geographic resources where there's a lot of businesses with large scale data that don't have the storage infrastructure or resources in their local market to serve those needs. So one that comes to mind, there's like a big increase in infrastructure in the MENA region. So Middle East, I don't remember what NA stands for, but Middle East area, that's an opportunity, I think, for various different storage providers to provide local resources to support a local economy. I know there's a lot of folks doing this in Korea right now, which is awesome to see. And again, these are areas where maybe people don't want to be relying on other nation states or other, centralized systems run by opposing national interests. It's a crazy world out there. Enable people to be resilient. This is also a unique opportunity around autonomous AI agents. Again, folks that might not have their own bank account or credit card to sign up for, the existing centralized Web2 services today. Also a great opportunity from the efficiency standpoint around edge computing and not having to transit really large amounts of data from places where that data is being collected originally. So we should harness that global, local nature of Filecoin. And last but not least, we're fully verifiable. We're Web3 native. We are true to this ecosystem and looking first next door to the dApps, DePIN networks, Web3 chains that share a lot of our same primitives and a lot of our same building blocks and dependency stack is, I think, a great place to continue to double click on finding the narrative and the on-ramp that's going to really resonate with that group and make it easier and faster and just the default versus allowing every on-ramp to be backed by a centralized Infura node that's storing everything to AWS, which just is not decentralized at the end of the day. And so we should make sure that we are demonstrating how it is easy and one-click shop to switch over from that failure mode to a success case. And we should also make sure as we're doing this, we interop nicely with other DePIN services because, again, AWS doesn't just offer you storage. It offers you a whole ton of other value-add services that you want to use and work with smoothly. And just a couple of notes here on we're onboarding 3.5 pips per day of data on the network. We have 6 active on-ramps that are live and actively onboarding data. There's 70 SPs with over 80% retrieval success rate. So there's a distributed global community of different autonomous storage providers. And I've Googled this, so I actually don't vouch for the veracity of this stat, but supposedly over 650 different DePIN networks out there in the world, which seems like a ton. But if that's true, we have a big target market of potential folks that we can collab with. Okay, so given our strengths within each of these verticals, who are our best ICPs? So I did a quick labeling of some that we had talked about during the most recent PMF Colo at ETH Denver, and did a quick coding of the checkmark delineates. We actively have multiple early adopters who are successfully onboarded their data to Filecoin, are generally happy users, though maybe they could still be happier, and maybe we're early testers of things. But we have active users across large-scale scientific data sets, archival backup, NFTs and digital real-world assets, and dsocial and dweb use cases, and some amount L1 chains as well. So we have active users who have onboarded there. In terms of active paying users who are actively, we know, paying for their data that they're storing on Filecoin today, slightly smaller subset. We know that there are some AI data warehouses that are starting to pay for their data on Filecoin, or at least committing to doing so. We know of some SMBs that care about decentralizing off of AWS or GCP lock-in that are paying for Filecoin storage as an alternative. Also some in the edge compute AI space that are paying for their storage. And then I know of one DePIN network that paid for their storage on Filecoin. So we have a couple of groups where we have already existing data points of paying. And then this is entirely me categorizing things just based on my own understanding, but where is there PIBs, and ideally hundreds of PIBs, if not exabytes, of data volume being generated in these verticals that could conceivably flow to Filecoin in the next year to two. We for sure know that we have that for large-scale scientific data sets. We for sure know we have that with AI data warehouses. I believe this is here for SMBs decentralizing off AWS. I think we have the data on that from our client pipelines and the volume of data that they are bringing and the number of customers we see like them in markets. This is a guess on my part, but I think that there is a lot of this data that's non-US, that's data rich, that cares about geographical locality in different regions. I believe this is a growing market and is going to get larger as presuming that we don't suddenly go back to being a happy, peaceful, everyone's on the same page with a very strong collaborative relationships between nations. I'm seeing this increase, which makes me think that there's going to be more demand for people to locally store their data in their own geographic location, which means more demand for localized storage providers who are operating within, one nation's guidance and rule of law and everything. And there's, localized defaults around how that data will be used. And also from a benefit perspective, less uploading of those data sets you have to do over cross-regional pipes. I'm sure Danny will talk about this more in his talk. I also, I think we all know that edge compute and AI is very much a growing and high data volume business that's scaling very quickly. And I think, we already talked about how Web3 chain storage, like these are, becoming like petabyte plus, especially as if we have 650 plus DPIN networks out there in the world that are all bringing infrastructural data about, mapping cities or, doing image scanning for different things, are quickly scaling in and of themselves. So I believe these areas have growing data volume, though I think we should do more research to confirm my gut assumptions. So given these, we can highlight things where we've already seen evidence of users willing to pay for the product we are offering and a growing market with growing data volume over time. So that's a first signal of like, these are right markets. We should make sure that we have good storage offerings. That being said, these are all markets where we literally have people who have already paid for storage in Filecoin. It's more like, how do we go from one to many instead of 0 to 1 in each of these areas? Now annotating it by where we have existing on-ramps that are explicitly targeting those markets. I think mostly Ramo and to some extent CID Gravity are the ones who are focused on large-scale Web 2. Akave is really focused on, I believe, SMBs and some amount edge compute and AI. Which is great because those are both paying markets. We've got a good community of folks focused on different aspects and target markets within Web3 object storage, and we don't have a whole ton of folks focused on Web3 chain storage. So this highlights that we do have a set of opportunities that are, important growing areas, but are not yet served by a really strong on-ramp who is able to scale this market from one to many. So that's a feedback loop to us that there is maybe net new opportunities for builders to come and address, and or maybe some of these other on-ramps to think about where there is a lot of similarity between these different ICPs and what they're already building today. Last but not least, I'll wrap. We talked about these back at the end of 2024, talking about what are some top level 2025 KPIs. The three we kind of landed on. Most important, revenue from paid storage deals. The number one thing that demonstrates we have product market fit is people paying for the service we are offering. And from our vantage point, that means paying for it on chain. It's great when there's payments that are happening to on-ramps out there, but until they get into on-chain paid deals, they don't quite count because they are not closing the whole economic loop. And so making sure that we land that metric, which we are not yet landing, though we're doing some of the early building blocks that get us there. Next, happy growing Filecoin service clients. We have some of these, we talked about them earlier. We have some of them that are paying. That's also a really good indication that they're happy and growing, is that they're paying more and more for the services that they're consuming. But that's an area to scale. Last but not least, service activity value accrual in the Filecoin economy. Things like USDFC and FIP 100 are both building blocks within there. And so Juan already talked a good bit about the data, but you can see deal making is stable and growing. While we might see deals expiring, actually, and you wouldn't necessarily see this from the graphs, the vast majority of data that has ever been onboarded to Filecoin is still in the Filecoin network, even if the deals associated with them have expired. And this is because we don't actually let you renew and extend deals right now. And almost everyone, I think it's like 88 or 90% of all sectors are being extended up until the maximum lifetime of sectors, which means that we have many sectors full of data that were originally made in archived or in deals that have now expired, but the data is still in the Filecoin network. So interesting learning. And not all of those deals have then been sealed again in new deals, but some of them have. Also, a learning point that like our population of deal-making storage providers is actually very stable and growing slightly. But you see that the overall number of providers with active deals has decreased. This is exactly that turnover of old kind of capacity farming providers that are exiting the network and rolling out, and our new community of much more engaged, actively deal-making storage providers, which are kind of maintaining and growing their role within the Filecoin network over time. So double clicking on those KPIs, revenue, we have more off-chain paying clients, which is great, but on-chain still just about zero. We saw a blip in the beginning of 2025, which was exciting, but it was not maintained, so we do not get to celebrate it. We now have PDP launched, which is a critical building block for meeting user needs with what they want. FWS, which is a critical thing for bringing payments on-chain in the way that clients want. But again, until we start seeing real on-chain revenue from paid storage deals, we cannot quite celebrate. Filecoin client growth, we have a whole ton of new on-ramps, each that are serving really interesting and exciting user needs, which is awesome. And we're starting to get better visuals around this, kind of to some extent related to the work we've been doing in the client success working group around success trackers, pain point dashboards, the dog fooding program that Steph is running. But we still need a much better shared public dashboard on happy client growth. We have run some surveys around this at the on-ramp level, but we need better visibility for the whole community at the client level. And then I mentioned around value economy, we're starting to connect this cycle, but we still need on-chain payments. We need a service fee related to those on-chain payments, which we're working on. And we need to make sure that we talk in this PhilDev Summit about L1, L2 value accrual to make sure that the L2s are champions of L1 on-chain payments and that they benefit from that and that we are all incentive aligned to keep growing this happy system. And also that L1 is very much motivated to build the components and building blocks that are going to make L2s and on-ramps scale faster and go to market faster, so that we can all succeed together. Just to highlight a couple of things that are semi-redacted, but to highlight they exist, we have our client success tracker highlighting different clients, whether they've fully uploaded, have started getting deals on chain, chosen an on-ramp, or just ready for POC. They exist. We're mapping them by their ideal customer profile. We're estimating how much value and resources they can bring to the economy and the scale of data and everything like that. There's also this awesome dashboard at the Filecoin Data Portal. Thanks again to David Gasquez for creating all these great things, which is mapping the data brought on-chain by each of these different on-ramps. Shout out to Sriracha, which is by far our number one, but second shout out to Triton, who has been a high volume deal maker within the Filecoin economy with up to over 2,000 daily deals in March, which is pretty cool. So we have a number of on-ramps. We've kind of categorized them by whether or not they are open for business fully, or if they're still in kind of an early focused area taking specific partners, and whether or not they are hosted or DIY OSS solutions that you have to manually operate yourselves. Last but not least, a couple of steps to continue scaling client success and these ICPs in order. We need to make sure that we as a community are aligned, and especially the client success working group is aligned on a narrow subset of ICPs that we are focused on doing market research in, understanding their needs deeply, and building that global pipeline that we can then supercharge all of the on-ramps and storage providers within the Filecoin economy by doing all of that top of funnel legwork so that they can onboard successfully in the network. Again, here's just the subsets of like paying and growing ICPs or ICPs with unmet needs by on-ramps today. We should talk about this more when we're in person in Toronto. I think we do really need to build a global pipeline. So again, not just folks inside the US, but also having expert end users building those pipelines in other areas of the world where we're seeing growth. We need to make sure that we are driving the incentives and the feedback loop so that on-ramps are constantly improving and that there is an incentive gradient, that we route clients to on-ramps with great customer experiences, and that clients that don't have a great experience, we factor that into whether or not we're going to route more clients to that flow, and that we're constantly just, churning through feedback and doing our dog fooding to make that better and better. We need to boot some of the missing on-ramps to meet needs of high volume and growing users that we're not meeting today, and to make sure we have the building blocks so those groups can go to market faster. We need to make sure we're collecting end-to-end metrics to inform and give visibility into this entire pipeline. And we need to make sure we land that on-ramp and L1 incentive alignment plan so that we are building towards a solution that works great for both L1 and L2s. Thank you guys so much.